the Leon Charney Report. And now, here is your host, Leon Charney.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and we have sort of an eclectic show today, but first let's talk some fundamental things with Dore Gold, who is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations and former, like the NSA, how do we compare him to Berger, I guess, Sandy Berger. He was the man who was next to Bibi Netanyahu on security matters, his security advisor, and then he was moved to the United Nations, which is a very important post. Welcome, Dore. We've never had you on the show before.
Thank you, Leon.
You're Hartford born.
Originally.
Gave up your American passport?
Gave it up.
Nice. True Jew. Dore, UN is a pretty active place today. First, let's talk about Iraq and Iran and that whole business. What's going on over there?
Well, I think the Iraq and Iran story reminds us that the Middle East is still a very dangerous place, a place where there are existential dangers to the state of Israel. In Iran today, we are watching the growth of an Iranian missile program. Originally, the Iranians tried to develop long-range ballistic missiles with the help of North Korea, but they found that working with blueprints alone, they couldn't get very far. Now they have the assistance of Russian technicians who are working to develop an Iranian ballistic missile program, which should give them, within a few years, the ability to strike ranges of about 1,300 kilometers, giving them basically the ability to strike Israel. But we also expect that they are working on programs to give them ranges to strike even targets in Europe and beyond. There are some indications that they're looking for an intercontinental capability.
It's a nice menu for today. Iraq, Saddam Hussein playing around with the UN. You're involved in that?
Well, we watch that carefully, although the issue of UNSCOM, the UN Special Commission, is really something the Security Council handles, and we're not part of the Security Council. It's something where the leadership position on taking care of Iraq is in the hands of the United States and the British. But of course it has direct implications for us. Iraq has been involved in at least 3 wars against Israel with large expeditionary forces that crossed either Jordan or Syria. And Iraq, of course, struck us with ballistic missiles during the Gulf War. So to the extent to which Saddam Hussein can break out of these restrictions and rebuild his mass destruction weapons capability, that's something which touches on the everyday lives of every Israeli.
Your gut feeling, what do you think will happen? The United States cannot tolerate this, nor can they move without sanctions, they have to bring the whole congregation of UN nations together like they did in the Gulf War. What's your gut feeling? Will they push them around?
Well, we've seen problems in the coalition between the United States and other parties that go back already a number of years. I recall in October 1994, for example, Saddam Hussein brought massive tank forces. He concentrated large armored divisions on his southern border with Kuwait. The United States sought the help of the international community to do something about that, and basically none of the Arab partners of the United States, with the exception of Kuwait itself, not even Saudi Arabia, was willing to lift a finger. So the coalition has been frayed for a number of years, and we hope, nonetheless, that the major powers of the UN, including France and Russia, will act responsibly and make sure that he complies with Security Council resolutions.
Dore, a lot of people come on the show, and I'll take up Eben, let's say he was on the show, the former foreign minister and ambassador to the UN. He says since the Netanyahu government came into power, you've lost a lot of relationships with some of the foreign Arab nations, Qatar, Bahrain, name them, Morocco. Everybody is angry. Is that a true statement?
There is a problem in the Arab world. I don't accept Mr. Eban's analysis. I do accept the analysis of someone like Fuad Ajami, the great American Middle East expert of Lebanese origin, who wrote in February of this year, February 1997, in U.S. News and World Report, that there is a crisis in the peace process, but it goes to the fact that the peace that was made in all those great ceremonies over the last years was the king's peace or the pharaoh's peace, a peace between leaders that didn't reach to the hearts of peoples below. And as a result, there's been tremendous resistance in the streets of the Arab world to this peace, and eventually the leaders have buckled under. I know in Qatar, a public opinion survey was done on peace with Israel, even before the peace process had its current impasse. And there's tremendously deep rejection of Israel in the Arab world. Tom Friedman, who I don't always agree with, wrote a column in the New York Times, also in the month of February, why it was that Prime Minister Netanyahu couldn't stop in Morocco on the way back from a U.S. visit, having just completed the Hebron Agreement, a major advance in the Oslo process. And the reason was because King Hassan's domestic politics, according to Mr. Friedman, didn't permit him to do so. So there is a problem in the Arab world. In that sense, I agree with Mr. Iban, but I disagree with the analysis. I think the problem is related to the Arab world.
You're right on one point. I can tell you that when they signed the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty, I was in downtown Amman filming. And I can tell you that most people in that country were not that excited about it. There was a lot of resentment against that peace treaty. There was a lot of anger. And we were nearly overwhelmed by people who tried to get to our cameras and all that. It was a pretty rough situation. So from that point of view, I would agree with you. It could be deemed a king's peace. But, Dore, Bibi Netanyahu walked into a government. There was an Oslo agreement signed, sealed, delivered yesterday. It was two years since the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Where is Israel today in terms of that peace agreement?
Well, when Benjamin Netanyahu was elected Prime Minister of Israel in May of 1996, the peace process was not a blazing success. We had over 250 Israelis who were killed in various bus bombings and other types of suicide bombings in the heart of Israeli cities. We didn't have those kind of losses from Palestinian terrorism for at least a decade. So here, a decade, the numbers that it would normally take a decade to lose, we were suddenly losing in 3 years. On our Syrian border, everyone spoke about the peace with Syria. But we had in 1995 and 1996, 200 Katyusha rockets that rained on northern Israel in the Galilee, 2 mini-wars in Lebanon. And so we had an ironic phenomenon that occurred. On the one hand, people spoke about peace. On the other hand, Israelis experienced an unprecedented worsening of their personal security. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu could have said, you know what, this peace process isn't serious. If more Israelis are dying while we're talking about peace, then it's a fraud. He didn't do that. He also refused to ignore the problems of security that were emerging. He decided on something else. He decided to take this impaired peace process and try and make it work. It isn't easy. The peace process is full of contradictions. Working with Chairman Arafat or with President Assad is not like working with Anwar Sadat in 1977. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is determined to try and make this work with all the difficulties that we face.
The Prime Minister is coming to the United States to speak, I guess, at the General Assembly in Indianapolis. Was it next week or the 16th, 17th?
16th, 17th.
Around that time. And I was in Israel last week, and the papers were full of speculation of whether President Clinton would invite him or speak with him or meet with him, and I don't know where it is today even. And there are many people who say that for the Prime Minister of Israel to come to the United States and not meet with Clinton is sort of a slap in the face by President Clinton. Do you agree with that?
Well, I know the Prime Minister has made his schedule for his trip, which will, in all likelihood, involve stops in Indianapolis and in Los Angeles. And the White House has been informed of his schedule. Should the President find the time to have a meeting, even a short meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, that would be fine. There's a lot to talk about. If not, I'm sure the Prime Minister and the President could find a time in a future trip to meet.
So you're not that concerned about it?
No, I don't think we have to always, compare suntans. Who got to meet the President, how many times. The President has a busy schedule. I know he'll be on the West Coast during much of that trip. And if they can work out a time to meet, that's fine. If they can't, well, there'll be another trip. They can always set a date for the future.
All right, we're going to cut for a break, and we'll come right back and talk to Ambassador Dore Gold, who is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. It's a prickly time for the United Nations and for Israel at this moment, and we need his insight. We'll be right back. We're back. We're talking to Ambassador Dore Gold, Israel's United Nations representative, and that's a very tough spot. We used to talk to Gad Jacobi a lot. You know, I had on this show Ambassador Butler from Australia, who's now in charge of that whole business in Iraq. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Good man.
He's a very good man.
Very good man. And nice wife, too. Very pleasant people. Dore, let's talk about you as a person. Why, 20 years ago, did you emigrate to Israel?
Well, I believe I had an opportunity to be a Jew living in this time when we've rebuilt the state of Israel, to be part of that rebirth. And I wanted to contribute my strengths, whatever I could give, to the security and well-being of Israel. And when you think of the fact that our fathers and grandfathers prayed to return to Jerusalem, for me to stay on the sidelines and not be part of it, I felt was the wrong thing to do. So I came to be active, not just to live in Jerusalem and do nothing, but to be part of the rebuilding of the state.
You're exactly the prototype of what your president, Ezer Weitzman, wants from all Jews in the world. Ezer Weitzman has told me innumerable times that to him, a Zionist is a person who comes to live in Israel. A pro-Zionist is one who supports Zionists. He said that at a major convention in Atlanta, Georgia, to a bunch of Zionists. He says, for you to be Zionist, you must move to Israel. You believe that's a fair statement?
I believe all Jews can take part in the rebirth of Israel. Some of us, and I think it's a personal choice, are willing to make the plunge and actually move to Israel, become Israeli citizens, enter the Israeli army, become part of Israeli society. Others can do it occasionally. There's an expression I one time heard, demi aliyah. People have an apartment in Jerusalem but live in the United States and come for 2 months, come for chagim, for holidays. That's also legitimate. I don't want to judge people. People make personal choices. But I think we all can take part in the rebirth of Israel, and I think it can feed back to the diaspora as well and strengthen Judaism and Jewish life here as well.
Was there any one incident that motivated you to take up your roots from, where were you, in Hartford? Born in Hartford, Connecticut?
Well, I was born in West Hartford, Connecticut, and went to high school in Massachusetts and college in New York at Columbia.
So was any one thing? A lot of people, you know, I've talked to said after the 6-Day War they moved to Israel. This was a motivational thing for them. Sometimes they were uplifted for different reasons. I'm just curious because most of our audience is curious about these types of things. Or it was your background very Zionistic, your parents?
Well, I think my parents contributed greatly, but I believe the question, I think for most young people growing up in the 1960s when I grew up, was how to do something meaningful with your life, how to become part of a larger whole, how to be part of what we call in Hebrew tikkun olam. You can do that by choosing a universal mission that has nothing to do with Judaism. You know, go protest civil rights, go protest other things, which are very important. Or you can do it within the particularism of the Jewish people. I felt that was my way of doing it. And when I'm at the United Nations, speaking to other nations in the name of Israel and the Jewish people, I do it with great pride.
Let's talk about Jews for a minute. Big item in Israel now is the conversion bill. And I read an item where you went to certain synagogues on the holidays and certain people were not very nice about it. I'm not sure, so you tell me what happened. You went to a conservative congregation, is that it?
Well, first of all, let's put this in the right context. Okay. I think it's important that representatives of Israel go to all movements,
right?
Whether they're Orthodox, whether they're conservative, whether they're Reform, because all Jews are legitimate Jews. And we shouldn't take this conversion controversy and turn this into a split in the Jewish people, like between Pharisees and Sadducees and between Karaites and Rabbinites. And we should put all that aside. And I think it's important, and I therefore made the effort, and I went to different synagogues. One individual in a synagogue on the Upper West Side confronted me with some sort of harsh statements about why I was coming into his synagogue if I represent a country that doesn't see him and his congregation as Jewish. I'm not going to blame a whole synagogue, or I'm not going to blame the conservative movement because it was a conservative synagogue for the act of one individual. And obviously, I don't know who went to the press with this story. It wasn't me. So some guy was a little hot-headed and verbally attacked a representative of the State of Israel. It happens.
Not a big deal.
I said to him, and I said to the other people there, it was Simchat Torah, I said, all Jews are welcome in my home. I hope I'm welcome in your home. And I walked into his shul.
And it worked out?
It worked out, except it was in the press.
Nobody knows who leaked it.
Well, it's not a big leak. We're not talking about a foreign ministry telegram.
No, but it could be sensitive because the issue is very sensitive right now. I saw an item where Ben Elisar, your ambassador in Washington, walked out of the Reform Convention.
Well, some very bad things were said by a spokesman I don't think comes from the Reform movement. But go ahead.
But do you know the incident?
I read a little bit about it, but I haven't spoken to Ambassador Ben Elisar, so until I speak to him, I'm not going to judge it from the newspaper article.
All right, let's go into the conversion bill because it's a big item in the United States, but when I was in Israel, most Israelis were apathetic about it. They were not that concerned, and people don't understand that in this country. It's not that big a deal, even to the secular Jews in Israel. It's not that big a thing. Now, as I understand it, there was a status quo that was initiated by David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, which meant is basically you leave me alone, I leave you alone. We talked to Dr. Borg about it, Yosef Borg, last week in Israel. What happened was the Reform and the conservative Jews went to the Supreme Court to try and make this a law of the land. And am I correct? Or?
Well, I think your first part is absolutely correct. There was a status quo going back for all of Israeli history, that the only conversions recognized in Israel were Orthodox conversions.
Right.
But conversions anywhere else in the world, in Cyprus, the United States, Russia, that were Reform or conservative, if they're done outside of Israel, they would be recognized.
Wait a minute. If a person, a lot of people don't know this, I want to be very careful because they don't understand it very well. If I married a Jew, not convert, was converted by a Reform Jew, had a child in New York City, and the conversion took place by a rabbi in New York City who was Reform, and they came to live in Israel, and she was married to an Israeli, she and the child will be accepted in Israel?
All conversions, absolutely. All conversions
a lot of people
done outside the borders of Israel by the Reform and conservative movement are accepted in Israel today, and it's not even part of this controversy. In fact, I'll tell you a story. When Prime Minister Netanyahu was putting together his coalition agreement with the religious parties, they came to him and said, we not only want to be sure that only Orthodox conversions are recognized in Israel, we want to make sure that only Orthodox conversions are recognized from the whole world, so that, we won't be able to say that a Reform conversion in the U.S. would be recognized. Prime Minister Netanyahu told the Orthodox parties, that I won't do. That is unacceptable. And they had to compromise. They had to pull back. Now, the only reason we're caught into this morass is because there was a court challenge done by certain individuals from the conservative and Reform movements in Israel to our Supreme Court. Once this litigation process started, the Orthodox parties feared that the court would now rule that the status quo that for years had been there since Golda and Ben-Gurion, that this status quo would no longer be tenable. And therefore they wanted to protect the status quo with formal legislation. What the Prime Minister has been saying to everybody is, hold on, time out. You, the Reform and Conservative, pull back your court challenge, pull back the litigation. I will go to the Orthodox parties and I'll get them to pull back the legislation. And in that time out, what we have to do is sit together, Jews of Orthodox background, conservative, Reform, in what's called the Ne'eman Commission.
Yaakov Ne'eman, the Minister of Finance.
Absolutely, and try and work out a deal. But we can't put the state of Israel at tremendous risk. We can't put a hand to the throat of the state of Israel and say, you must settle this by such a time or we're going to have a break in the Jewish people. That's untenable. There are tremendous dangers out there. People think the Middle East was more or less at peace. There are a few little pieces to put together in the peace process. That isn't true. How far is Saddam Hussein from Israel? 300, 400 kilometers? What happens when he resumes his military strength? What happens when Iran achieves a ballistic missile capable of striking us? What happens when the world sees this terrible rift in the Jewish people? How will they respond? And how will our friends in different parts of the world respond? Israel has great challenges, but Israel is willing, and the government of Israel is willing, to have this dialogue What we have to now do is give this dialogue a chance. As they used to say, give peace a chance, give dialogue a chance. And try and work out a deal within the Ne'eman Commission.
But what's the big hitch here? I mean, it sounds reasonable the way you're talking. What is the big hitch?
Because if you say that there is now formal legislation that's taking the old status quo and turning it into a formal law that only Orthodox conversions are recognized in Israel in response to a court challenge, people can get up and say, the state of Israel says, I, as a Reformed Jew, am no longer a legitimate Jew. That is a logical leap. That isn't true, but it makes good rhetoric. In any case, it's a mistake to do that. Everyone has to pull back. Everyone has to exercise responsibility. The Reform and conservative movements and the Orthodox movements and Orthodox parties. We are very close to the abyss. We have to pull back from the abyss.
All right. Traditionally, ambassadors to the UN and consul generals here, they talk to a lot of Jews in the city and the state around the area. Have you been able to convey this message to a lot of Reform and conservative Jews?
Well, this isn't my formal job.
I understand.
And so I'm not going to synagogues giving this lecture. But whenever I reach elites or speak to them or speak in large audiences, I definitely give this message, whether was it an APAC conference recently in Florida? I'm going to the GA. I'm supposed to speak at the end of the GA. This will be part of my message.
But what is the reaction when you do explain it? Do people accept it?
I think the bulk of Jews, the bulk of the American Jewish community, prefer the politics of unity over the politics of polarization. I believe most people's hearts are in trying to overcome this. People are also very hurt because this has been explained to them that they're not legitimate Jews. And they're very hurt. I can understand that. If somebody said, I'm not a legitimate Jew, I'd be very, very hurt. If somebody said, you can't go into this synagogue, you're rejected. Of course. But that's not true. The state of Israel and the shield of Zionism are there to protect every Jew, no matter what his background is, whether he's Orthodox, Reform, or conservative.
All right, I accept what you say, but don't you think that this should be given more? No one understands it like this.
What do you do, put it on an internet site?
Maybe.
What do? You put it on a brochure?
Maybe print a big ad in the newspapers, just the way you lay it out, and say, look, every Jew who's converted, do some public relations on it. You're right, it's a tragedy, because I've been in Israel, and I see what's going on there, and this has become an alienation process, where everybody grabs on and says, well, I'm not welcome there, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to give them money. You know, it's
I'm not traveling, let's go to the Bahamas this year, not to Tel Aviv.
That's right.
Sure.
Now, the way you present it, it seems pretty logical and fair and Jewish. And I don't give advice on this show. I get paid high price for my advice, but I'll do it for nothing. I'll say right now that the state of Israel and the press office and the consul general should make a major campaign about what is going on, because I'm telling you, it's a real problem out there. And I'm not pontificating now, but you are Jewish and I'm Jewish. We both have families in Israel. We care about it. Let's talk about a happy subject, Lebanon. What's going on over there, Dore?
I want to take one step back, because I made reference to President Sadat, who you knew from the Camp David period. When President Sadat came to Israel to start the peace process with our late Prime Minister Menachem Begin, he said 3 words: no more wars. And that meant violence couldn't be part of the negotiating process.
Correct.
It was removed. Let's say there was an impasse between Israeli and Egyptian negotiators, and there were plenty of impasses. You didn't suddenly find 2 brigades of Egyptian tanks concentrated in western Sinai to send a signal to Prime Minister Begin to make a concession. That didn't happen. But what's happening in the whole Lebanon-Syria theater? Iranian aircraft land every few weeks, jumbo jets, in Damascus International Airport, carrying parts of Katyusha rockets and other weapon systems. These weapon systems are moved from Damascus to the Bekaa, eastern Lebanon, where they go to the forces of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is incessantly attacking Israel, attacking us in the north, attacking our villages. As I said before, in 1995 and 1996, at the height of the peace process, 200 Katyusha rockets land in northern Israel. We have an area called the security zone. In that security zone, we have stationary Israeli positions, but the area in southern Lebanon is generally under the control of the South Lebanese Army.
General Lakhad.
Right. And we are facing a lot of losses in the security zone. Now there's a question. If we pull out of the security zone, maybe Hezbollah will lose its motivation to keep attacking us. Unilateral withdrawal. There are many who think, and in fact the heads of Hezbollah have said it, that they will continue into northern Palestine, as they say, into the Galilee. The security zone was originally created to prevent infiltration. Of course, they can shoot a rocket over the security zone. The only way to solve the Lebanon problem is if Syria commits itself to disarm Hezbollah, or to see that Lebanon disarms Hezbollah the same way other militia in Lebanon were disarmed right after the Taif Accords of 1989. It's untenable that the Christians have to disarm, the Druze have to disarm, but Hezbollah doesn't disarm. So that is the way, that is the key to making a settlement in Lebanon. If the Hezbollah disarms, we can create security arrangements that would allow Israel to take a more flexible position in southern Lebanon. That is the key for breaking out of this process, but it requires a Syrian decision. And it requires also the international community to tell Syria that using Hezbollah terrorism against Israel is not a way to advance the peace process. You don't advance peace with violence. You advance peace with peace.
Well, I'll confirm what Sadat said. I know it factually, and I've been there and I've heard it. And it was true. What you're dealing with is a totally different bag of worms, shall we say. Do you think, by the way, Dore, do you think that the Netanyahu government, especially your prime minister, gets fair press in the United States?
Well, you know, if you come from the liberal side of the political spectrum, you have your complaints against the press, and if you come from the conservative side, you have your complaints against the press. I know that when conservative politicians often get elected, in the United States in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States. Everyone said this is going to be a disaster. Soviet-American Cold War renewed. Well, Ronald Reagan ended the Cold War. We were one time in Bonn, Germany, and we met with Helmut Kohl, the Chancellor of Germany. And he said, yes, I come from the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, and when my party replaced the Schmidt Socialist Party, everyone said it's the end of peace in Europe, it's going to be unstable, we have a right-wing government in Germany, it's going to be a disaster. Well, Kohl was a part of those arrangements that brought an end to the Cold War. And when another Israeli by the name of Menachem Begin was elected prime minister in 1977, I remember Newsweek magazine, front page, Day of the Hawks. The banner headline. And of course, Begin brought peace with Egypt. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to surprise a lot of people. But until those agreements are reached with these very tough peace partners, he's going to get a bad press.
All right, Dore, we'll hold for a break and we'll come right back. I'm going to ask you how tough it is for the Prime Minister to be involved with Yasser Arafat, because really, when he ran for Prime Minister, I think he said he wasn't really going to speak to Yasser Arafat. So we'll come back and ask you.
Okay.
We're back. We're speaking to Dore Gold, who makes a strong case for his government. He's the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, American-born, and emigrated about 20 years to Israel. Perfect prototype of what we consider a Zionist, or at least Ezer Weitzman does. Dore, your prime minister campaigned on a very strong issue, was that he really didn't want to talk to Yasser Arafat, if I recall. And then this famous handshake at the White House, and the fact that he has to talk to him. What's your take on that?
Well, I think this shows how far the prime minister has gone. He actually stated prior to the elections that he would meet Mr. Arafat if it was important for Israeli security, not because he relished the idea, not because he was into a love fest with the PLO, but because there was a reality out there that he had to deal with. But he moved from that position to doing the accord on Hebron, which many people forget, which wasn't done by the previous government. He went on from that to talking about a program for final status called Alon Plus, which sounds very much like a program of territorial compromise.
Yigal Allon, the former foreign minister in the Labour Party, who had a plan of how to solve the Palestinian issue.
Yes, on the basis of territorial compromise. So he has taken his party and the conservative side of the Israeli political spectrum pretty far from a rejection of Oslo to talking about Alon Plus. And I think this has not at all been appreciated in the United States and elsewhere in the world. I think instead there's been a kind of mantra on Israeli intransigence that's picked up automatically. It was done to Golda, it was done to Menachem Begin, and it's being done to Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's unacceptable and it's not true. Anybody who knows what really has been going on the ground.
Do you think chemistry between leaders is important in making foreign policy? We know that there's not a great as you say it, between Netanyahu and Arafat. You think that if there were a better chemistry, it would help?
Well, our late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Mr. Arafat weren't kissing cousins either.
No, I can swear to that. I brought the first greetings from Yasser Arafat to Yitzhak Rabin. He was not very excited about it.
No, not at all. I think what makes leaders click, I think there's two things. One, what are their interests? And second of all, their ability to deliver. If Yasser Arafat says to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I need to use my aircraft for certain reasons. I need to have I have certain needs. I need to have certain access in the international community, or I need certain favors. And you respond, and you can deliver those favors. And it's reciprocal. I need information on Israeli soldiers missing in action, and the Palestinians can deliver on that. That creates the confidence to proceed. You know what happened to us? Because I know I was the first envoy of the Netanyahu government sent to Yasser Arafat. I will never forget March 9th, 1997. There was a meeting between Mr. Arafat and the leaders of Hamas and other Palestinian organizations, opposition organizations. And we know from our intelligence sources that those leaders walked away with a clear impression that they had a green light from Mr. Arafat to resume terrorist attacks against us. So when you talk about chemistry, how do we live with that? How do we cut a deal? How do we work when we know he's been giving clear orders, and our intelligence branch tells us that? So you know what we do? We don't give up on the process, but we ask that world pressure be applied on Mr. Arafat to behave like Anwar Sadat, to reject violence as part of the peace process. Instead, people are talking about putting pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu. But the pressure has to be placed on Mr. Arafat to prevent the violence, to prevent the bus bombings and the killing of innocent Israelis. If the pressure is put there, we can make the peace process work. If the pressure is put on us, Mr. Arafat will get the wrong idea, and I'm afraid many Israelis will die.
So, Dore, can you explain this to me? How come the Rabins are so close to Arafat today? I saw Yuval Rabin, the late Prime Minister's son, wrote an article yesterday about bringing Arafat close. Did you see that in the New York Times? There was what happened over there? Why is this massive love of Yasser Arafat now by the Rabin family?
I don't want to address the Rabin family. I just understand the policies and the viewpoints of our late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. What families decide to do afterward is, of course, a personal matter, and they're their complete right to do so.
Okay, the Jordanian relationship after the fiasco or whatever it was in Jordan, how's it going?
Jordan and Israel are tied with mutual strategic interests that go back many years. You know, making peace with Jordan was like making peace with a strategic ally, not with a former adversary. Jordan is a country surrounded by very large, stronger neighbors. To the north, Syria, which has been, over the years, sponsoring terrorist penetrations of Jordanian territory from Syria in order to cause terrorist acts inside Jordan itself. To the east, Saddam Hussein, who was once a partner of Jordan, but ever since about 1995 became far more hostile to Jordan, and there have been firefights on the Iraqi-Jordanian border. To the south, Saudi Arabia, an old rival of the Hashemite throne, and not willing to really come to terms with Jordan in the proper way that most of us would like in the West. And therefore, Jordan, surrounded by these more difficult and hostile neighbors, has always had a special relationship with Israel. I think that special relationship and those mutual interests will endure despite the mishap that reportedly occurred in Jordan.
Now, let me ask you a question. When you were sitting outside the government, were you a professor, Dore? Is that it?
Well, I worked in a think tank for 10 years, a strategic studies think tank that had been under the directorship of Major General Aaron Yariv, formerly head of Israeli military intelligence during the Six-Day War.
Aaron Yariv, in case you didn't know, was a terrific guy and a great intelligence personality.
And he was my teacher.
Good teacher. So you're sitting there in this think tank, and you became friendly with Benjamin Netanyahu. The day the Oslo agreements were signed, what was your reaction?
I had closely followed the talks with the Palestinians. I'd been an advisor to the Israeli delegation at the Madrid Peace Conference in '91 and to the subsequent talks in Washington.
You were in Madrid?
I was in Madrid.
Me too.
Well, the then deputy
We starved, Dore. There's only potato chips and Pepsi.
the then deputy foreign minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, took me along with him, and
he was a big star at that
yes.
conference.
And I remember reading the Oslo Accords, and I was very dismayed. But I understood the motivation to do Oslo. Israel had been bogged down in the Intifada, had been bogged down in a status quo that was untenable. And our late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin had the courage to try and break out of this with something new, thinking that over time, if there were mistakes in the agreement, and he said there were holes in the agreement, we could plug those holes. But what was important was to break through, to create a new reality. And I think he was right. I think he was visionary to do it. But there were still problems, and once we saw that our security situation so seriously deteriorated as Oslo was implemented, we knew that we had to modify Oslo to make it tenable.
All right. Hear me out for 1 minute. The day that Yitzhak Rabin entered into the Oslo Agreement, if he would have said to Yasser Arafat, look, you strike your covenant against me, the same day that I sign, or I recognize you as an entity, and then we go and we talk in Geneva for 5 years, you think that could have worked out better than what you did now? What you did is you gave people land without an economic infrastructure. And
well, we also put a military force
right.
next to Israel without a final status agreement.
Right.
So that military force becomes part of the equation,
right.
part of the leverage of the Palestinian side, which is a dangerous situation. There's no question about it. We're trying to contain that and improve that situation. But that was the situation we inherited. There's another thing. The Oslo Accord is built on doing easy things first and putting off harder things for later. Jerusalem, that's the final status. But even in the interim status, creating a Palestinian airport, that's what's being discussed in Washington recently. A Palestinian airport with Israeli security checks. You've got to make sure that when planes land, cargo ships, cargo planes, that they don't have containers full of shoulder-fired missiles or parts of Katyusha rockets. Those are great risks. Those issues are much harder than the initial Oslo issues. So no wonder the Oslo process looks like it's getting stuck or it's at an impasse, because you're moving from easier issues to more difficult issues. All the tough stuff was put off for the end. And that end is the period in which Prime Minister Netanyahu is in power.
I can confirm that because I heard that from senior aides of Shimon Peres, and that was the theory. Last question, I'll let you go. Many people think that the Oslo Agreement leads to a Palestinian state. Explain to me, if you can, the difference between full autonomy and a Palestinian state. Now, I'm saying a state without a foreign ministry, without a defense ministry, sort of. Let's take the Netherlands Antilles. What's the difference?
Well, you do get into hair splitting here, but I think the most important thing to look at is rather than the name of the entity, the powers of the entity. There is not an Israeli Air Force commander or ex-commander who believes Israel can give up control of the airspace over the West Bank. Do you know of a state without an airspace?
No.
There is no one who believes that Israel can give up control of the eastern slopes of the West Bank facing the Jordan River and our eastern front, because perhaps in 5 years' time Saddam's army will be put back into shape, and it's 36 hours away from the Jordan River. You need to have a defensive force there, which is reinforced by IDF reserves in order to protect the state of Israel. You need early warning stations on the hilltops of the West Bank to pick up hostile aircraft or, in the future, missiles coming at Israel. And therefore, we have very specific security needs. We cannot have a situation where in that sensitive area of the West Bank, which is next to 70% of our population and 80% of our industrial infrastructure, in that area, the Palestinians or any Palestinian self-governing authority can make a military alliance with Iraq and Iran. So there are obvious limitations. There are obvious powers that can be given to the Palestinians, but there are also powers that cannot. I suggest that we sit down with the Palestinians and honestly present our case. So these are things we can do and these are things we can't do. And when we're finished working out the powers, we'll get down a political lexicon and we'll give it a name. But to give it a name first, to call it a state, that becomes an envelope in which many powers can be given to the Palestinians, which they can rightfully demand as a state, which will threaten the security of Israel. Because, you see, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a conflict between two peoples on an island in the Indian Ocean. Where the Palestinians are demanding self-determination is in territory that is vital for the defense of Israel against coalitions of Arab armies that have historically struck Israel at least 3 or 4 times from our Eastern Front. That's the puzzle we have to solve in final status talks. I am optimistic in the long run. I believe we can cut a deal.
I did Camp David. Ali Zaslow to you. Thanks for coming on, and you're welcome anytime, Dore.
Thank you.
We'll be back after a break. You think the Middle East is tough? We're going to bring on the Minister of Economy for the country of Croatia. See how that works. We're back. Big area in the world has been Bosnia, Croatia, Yugoslavia, and personally, it's a fascinating area, and a lot of us don't understand it very well. So we invited the Minister of Economy or Economic Planning of Croatia to come in and talk with us, and his name is Nenad Porges. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Mr. Porges?
You pronounced it fantastically.
Really?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Croatia is about 4.5 million people. Its capital is Zagreb, and you went through a very tough time recently, obviously. How's the country doing today?
Quite well, taking into consideration first a couple of years of our independence. Like be reminded that after 91, after dissolution of Yugoslavia and establishing independence, we were really target of aggression, and we succeeded despite all odds to defend ourselves. And starting with 93, we started to rebuild country and to rebuild confidence, to rebuild economy, and to establish basement for brighter future.
What's the economy based on in Croatia?
Let me make you understand. GDP breakdown of 96 was 60% services, mainly tourism, construction, transportation, 30% industry, and 10% agriculture. If we are speaking about industry, main industries are shipbuilding, maybe chemical processing, textile, wood processing, food processing. Tourism is on rapid track to regain confidence, because certainly for risk perception, Croatia was not a desirable site to be visited in early stages of independence, but last year...
Only if you're a reporter.
Yes, unfortunately. But that was fortunate as well, because headline news has brought attention to the region and specifically to Croatia, and I think that it sidewise contributed to knowledge. Not completely. There are certain blanks to be filled on understanding what Croatia is.
What's the major religion in Croatia?
It's Catholicism, actually. You should be reminded that in 4th century of Common Era, division line between Eastern Roman Empire and Western Roman Empire was actually across boundaries between Serbia, Bosnia, and Croatia, Slovenia and Croatia, and parts of Bosnia being in Western Roman Empire, and the rest of former Yugoslavia was under Eastern Roman Empire, what later on became division line between Greek Orthodox Church and Catholic Church.
But when you were born, you were a citizen of Yugoslavia.
That's true. I was born in 1946. I was citizen of Yugoslavia, yes. I was citizen of Republic of Croatia. I was born in Republic of Croatia as part of that time Yugoslavia.
How bad was Marshal Tito, or how good was he?
Nobody's perfect, and we could not judge in terms of black or white. He was a human being. He contributed to maybe better understanding. He was trying to put human face on socialism of his own invention. To some extent, obviously, he has had vices. He has postponed crisis in Yugoslavia. He was maverick. He really succeeded to postpone crisis, and actually crisis was visible almost a decade after his death. By borrowing, by presenting both sides, that means Moscow and Washington, pretty face, he succeeded in his maneuvering.
Is there peace now in the region?
Yes, I think basically, if we are speaking about stability, yes, it is obtained. It's not anymore war risk or something like spillover, in fact, but there is long road, maybe bumpy road towards total stability in neighboring Bosnia, and that's our major concern because you should understand that the longest frontier we have is actually with Bosnia.
Do you have any relationships with Bosnia?
Yes, we do. We are signatories of Washington and Dayton agreements, which actually brought peace to the whole region.
Holbrooke, Mr. Holbrooke.
Yes,
Sure
tough negotiator. I've met him, I think, only once. I was not directly involved in those negotiations. I admire his persistence, his specific style in diplomacy, but obviously that
you
style
can use
brings...
him now. He's a investment banker now, isn't he?
Yes, but he is still involved, I think, in the region. Actually, over President Tudjman and Izetbegovic meeting in Split last summer, Mr. Holbrook was there and Gelbart. So, yes, as investment banker, I would be more happy to meet him and discuss possibilities for economies, mutually beneficial projects in Croatia.
In a very simplistic way, because a lot of people in the United States don't understand it, what caused that conflict, that terrible conflict between Bosnia and Croatia, etc.?
Century-long idea of some circles in Belgrade, some circles in Serbia about establishing Greater Serbia. Unfortunately, of course, I'm not blaming everybody in Serbia or Serbian people, but those ideas being developed somewhere by the late 19th century were very well hidden and alive all along Yugoslavia. Supremacy of Serbian people in police, in army, in politics, in diplomacy caused this fracture and caused all other people, including Macedonians, including Croats, including Slovenes, including Muslims, feeling deprived of their rights, and they were just exploiting something what was given by Constitution of 1974, former Yugoslavia, and that is right to opt for a referendum and to opt for independence. After we have done that, firstly Slovenia, then Croatia, unfortunately, Serbian-controlled Yugoslav army attacked.
But wasn't it really a conflict between the religious factors there?
I don't believe in that.
You don't think so?
I don't believe in that. Underlying reality is irrational dream about Greater Serbia and about constant supremacy. Of course, you could interpret it in the way you try to, because actually some major players are divided by religions, but I don't think that any religion pray or offer hatred, and that people acted as out of religious differences.
How good are your foreign reserves now? Do you have much foreign reserves?
Foreign
reserves.
Actually, I'll remind you that foreign currency reserves were stolen by Belgrade in the very beginning.
I know.
We were left with zero. And I'm proud to say that by August of this year, Central Bank of Croatia has had over $2.5 billion hard currency reserves. If I'll add the commercial bank hard currency reserves, it adds up to over $5 billion, what's equaling our outstanding foreign debt.
It's pretty good.
It is. It's excellent.
So it's a good place to invest.
I think it is, because Croatia is on fast track, regaining position we have had prior to whole crisis broke out. Last year we have had somewhere below 5% real GDP growth rate. This year we expect in years to come over 7%. We have macroeconomic stability, low inflation for 3 consecutive years, the lowest inflation of all transitional economies of Central Europe. Low budget deficit. Last year it was below 1%, this year 2%. We have foreign debt to GDP servicing ratio of around 25%, what's again the lowest ratio of that kind in Central Europe.
Pretty stable, very stable.
Yes, it is. I think that we achieved...
Are you looking for American investment?
Yes, we are. We are looking for continuing good relations, because actually some American companies are already exposed investing in Croatia. For example, Bankers Trust has invested in Croatia quite impressively over the last couple of years. Some of major investment bankers and houses were...
I'll tell you what Americans look for. A good judicial system.
It's in place.
And a good banking system.
It's close to be finalized. Out of 62 banks in Croatia, 55 are privatized, out of which 7 are branches or subsidiaries of major European banks. Unfortunately, not American banks yet.
They'll come in, don't worry. American banks like to run around a little bit. Citibank will
Like
be in
cavalry at the end.
Citibank will be in there before you know it. And the third thing they look for is a stable political situation.
It is stable. It is stable. All three, I think, preconditions. I'm not advertising, I'm not preaching, I'm trying to present to our viewers facts. I think that political stability is in place. It depends to some extent what's going to happen in Bosnia, but nothing of brutal nature could explode there. To make it maybe like anecdote, in standard tango you need 2, in Bosnia you need 3, because you have federation on one hand and you have Serbian entity. But I think that confidence building measures are bearing fruit, and it's visible that
You have a parliamentary government.
Yes, and we have 3 branches, judiciary,
So you follow the
executive.
American example?
To some extent.
You have a president.
Yes, we do have, but that's not the kind of presidential system you have. We have as well prime minister. It's closer to, let's call it French model.
Right. And the prime minister is part of the legislative process, and he can be brought down, the government vote of no confidence?
Yes, quite certainly. Quite certainly.
And you're part of the government, obviously.
Yes, I am.
You
I'm
elect-
appointed. I'm appointed. Basically, prime minister is mandatory, and he suggests to president members of his cabinet.
You don't have to be a member of the parliament.
No, not really.
And how many members in your parliament?
We have 2 counties. We have two parts. We have, let's call it, House of Counties, which has approximately 100 representatives, and we have so-called House of Representatives with 134 representatives.
And can you bring a vote of no confidence against the prime minister, and they change him?
Yes, and cabinet. Yes, it's quite possible, although it hasn't happened yet.
And your president is he command the armies? Is he the commander-in-chief, like in the United States?
Yes, but it's filtered down through chief of staff and to minister of defense as well. But it is close to the system you have in the United States.
The United States is helping you, the government, our government. Do they help you at all economically? Do they try and build it up?
Without offense, I think that Croatia is not asking for help, but for partnership and for mutually beneficial projects at corporate level. But I have to commend the U.S. government. Yes, we were helped in different facets in bringing or speeding up the democratic changes in society and system we have inherited from former communist or socialist system.
So you're a democratic country right now.
We wish to believe that we are on good path to develop full-fledged
Tell me
democracy.
personally for you, you were born in a communist country.
Yes.
When did you get your democracy? How old were you?
Personally?
Yeah.
Family-wise, from the very beginning of my remembrance,
Really?
Within family. Outside, being kid of 10 or 14, you do not recognize what the differences are between genuine democracy and system you were living in. You wish or tend to believe that that's the best world you are living in your adolescence.
You're absolutely right. A lot of Americans don't understand that. When I was in Russia in the 70s, and the people that I met there, they felt comfortable because the communism was taking care of their apartments, their homes, the whole way it went. They didn't know anything different. You know what changed everything? The satellite.
The communication, global
right.
village.
Global village.
I do agree with you. When you see that somebody is living better or could have better chances for education, for standard, for whatever.
KGB, who was around me all the time, asked me for 2 things. Levi's jeans and Frank Sinatra records and Elvis Presley records also. So I knew that the place was going to collapse.
But I have, again, maybe with due apology, to jump in and to say that even within Yugoslavia, this northern republic, Slovenia, Croatia, not only maybe, but we were closer to West European countries. We were not as closed as the rest of communist world. We have had our passports, we have traveled abroad. First time I traveled abroad, I was maybe 13 or 14.
What did your father do?
My father was pharmacist.
And was he communist or?
He was, as he was of Jewish origin, he was anti-fascist in anti-fascist movement during World War II, and after the war he stayed with the army, but he was not genuine communist. He was a specialist within the army as pharmacist.
And he was Jewish and he survived the war.
Yes, in anti-fascist units, in Croatia.
Do you feel Jewish today?
Partially, yes.
Which part?
Better part.
You're a gentleman and a scholar, and we hope your country really does well. It's a pleasure to have you on. Is this your first time in New York? You've been here many times.
No, I've been a couple of times in Big Apple, and I enjoy it every time I visited again, although it's only hit-and-run visit.
Mr. Minister, thanks for coming on and illuminating us about Croatia. A lot of people don't know a lot about it, and I hope they'll know more. And if you have a chance, visit Zagreb. You'll meet a man like the minister here. And he says it's a great place for tourism. We'll see you next week.
Please come and see our country.
We'll come. We'll come and do a live show.